Hello everyone and welcome back to Haunted Tales. Tonight, we bring you 10 deeply disturbing fall camping horror stories that will make you question every rustling leaf and every shadow that flickers beyond the firelight. As autumn settles in and the nights grow longer, the wilderness transforms. The crisp air carries whispers, and the dying leaves hide more than just the scent of rain. They conceal stories of fear, loss, and the unknown. In this episode, we'll journey deep into isolated forests and forgotten campsites where the chill of the season is matched only by the terror that lingers there. These are real accounts, first-hand testimonies from campers, hikers, and travelers who made it out alive to tell their stories. Some speak of strangers who shouldn't have been there. Others describe sounds that came from places where no human could stand. And a few recall things that simply defy all logic. Things that still haunt them whenever the fall fog rolls in. To protect the privacy of those involved, some names and locations have been changed. But every story you'll hear tonight has roots in truth, documented incidents, gathered from local archives, police reports, and witness statements. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Haunted Tales for nightly journeys into the darker corners of reality. And don't forget to ring the bell. Highway 70 snakes through the dense, leaf-choked forests of North Carolina, an old route that connects a scattering of small towns, their names fading on rusted green signs. Locals call one particular curve Devil's Bend, a sharp turn just before the abandoned Devil's Ridge campground. Few people camp there anymore. They say the forest remembers what happened, even if the people try to forget. The first recorded tragedy at Devil's Bend dates back to October 1972. A woman named Elaine Moore and her 2 children vanished after pulling over near the bend during a rainstorm. Her car was found days later, headlights still faintly glowing, doors open, the inside soaked and cold. No sign of Elaine or the children. Police searched for weeks, combing the woods, dredging the nearby river. Nothing. Only the faint sound of a woman crying was reported by officers on night patrols. They dismissed it as the wind, but the crying continued. Over the years, more reports surfaced. Campers at Devil's Ridge claimed to hear a woman sobbing just outside their tents. Sometimes she was close enough that they could hear the rasp of her breath between the cries. When they called out to ask if she needed help, the sobbing would stop, and something would move quickly behind them, brushing against the canvas. In 1994, a local trucker named James Rowland was driving east on Highway 70. Around 3 a.m. when he saw what he thought was a woman standing on the shoulder of the road near Devil's Bend. He said she was wearing a white nightgown, soaked and clinging to her skin, her head bowed. Thinking she'd been in an accident, he slowed his rig and pulled over. But when his headlights flickered, just for a second, she vanished. He told police later that the temperature in his cab dropped nearly 10 degrees. The smell of river water filled the air. It wasn't fear, he said in his statement. It was grief. I could feel it in my chest. The local sheriff's department still has that report. Over the decades, it's been joined by dozens more. Hikers finding children's handprints on the inside of their fogged windows. Campers waking to the sound of something wet dragging through the leaves. Motorists spotting a pale figure kneeling in the middle of the road, always crying, always alone. In 2009, a pair of college students from Raleigh decided to document the legend for a film project. They camped at Devil's Ridge in late October, recording EVP sessions and night vision footage. The recovered camera, found days later by a search party, shows the 2 laughing by their fire, talking about the stories. Around 1:37 a.m., the camera shakes violently, then falls sideways. Off-screen, a woman's voice can be heard whispering, "Please, help my babies." The footage ends there. Their bodies were never found. Today, Devil's Ridge campground is overgrown, nature reclaiming what's left of the old sites. The Park Service officially lists it as closed to the public, though that doesn't stop thrill seekers from sneaking in during the fall. Locals say if you drive past Devil's Bend after midnight, you might see the faint glow of a campfire through the trees, even though no one is there. A retired ranger, Tom Callahan, still lives a few miles from the site. He was part of the 1972 search for Elaine Moore. When interviewed in 2018, he said he'll never forget one night during the search. standing near the river's edge with his flashlight scanning the fog. He heard someone crying softly just ahead. "I thought it was her," he said, his voice breaking. I called out her name, and the crying stopped. Then something cold touched my hand, like a child holding on. He looked down, but no one was there. Only wet leaves pressed into the shape of a small handprint on his wrist. Pause, faint wind, dripping water. To this day, drivers on Highway 70 report the same thing. A crying woman on the roadside, always near Devil's Bend, always soaked to the bone. And when they pull over to help, she disappears. Local legend says she's still searching for her children, lost to the flood that night in 1972. Others say something darker keeps her bound there, a curse born from grief so strong that even death couldn't silence it. Either way, if you ever find yourself driving that lonely stretch of road on a cold fall night, and you hear a woman crying in the distance, whatever you do, don't stop. When the leaves start turning that deep rust color along Highway 70, locals know what it means. The season of voices is back. Between late September and November, the calls to the sheriff's office spike. Mostly the same report. There's someone crying by the bend. Deputy records from 2013 show at least 11 separate 911 calls in 1 week. Each from different motorists, all describing the same woman. Dark hair, soaked clothes, standing still with her face hidden in her hands. One call came from a delivery driver named Mark Tuttle, who insisted the figure had followed his headlights, like she floated instead of walked. When the deputies arrived, they found only a patch of wet ground and the faint smell of stagnant river water. By dawn, the fog was thick enough to choke the forest line. Locals say that's when she moves the most, when the mist rolls down from the ridges, carrying her sobs through the valley. Hunters in the nearby woods have reported hearing weeping mixed with laughter, echoing from every direction. One hunter described it as a woman crying and a child laughing right behind it, like they were connected somehow. No wildlife ever responds to those sounds. The forest holds its breath. In 2016, a paranormal research team from Asheville decided to document Devil's Bend using motion sensors and temperature monitors. The footage recovered from that night was never released publicly, but one of the researchers, Erica Jennings, later gave an interview to a local paper before leaving the field entirely. "We were at Site 12, she said. It was around 2:40 a.m. The air dropped suddenly from 60 degrees to the low 40s. Then the crying started, not from the woods and from inside one of our tents. It was soft, like a mother humming between sobs. When we opened the flap, it stopped. All of our equipment was dead, except the recorder. You can hear me breathing and something else, a voice whispering my name. I hadn't told anyone there my full name. The tape, now held by a private collector, supposedly captures one last phrase before cutting out. He took them. Some believe Elaine Moore's husband, Henry, was responsible for her disappearance. Police questioned him extensively in 1972 after learning of domestic troubles and a restraining order filed the month before. But he had an airtight alibi. He was working a night shift 30 miles away. He died in 1988, reportedly babbling in his sleep about the river children and the woman in the reeds. Visitors who've trespassed into Devil's Ridge claim the area feels wrong and unnatural, quiet that smothers sound. Even the crickets fall silent. Some say if you whisper her name, Elaine, the wind carries back an echo, like someone repeating it through tears. One camper's online forum post from 2019 described a terrifying encounter that caught national attention before being deleted. "We thought it was a prank," the post read. "We heard crying outside the tent, then little feet running around us. I looked out and saw 3 figures, one tall, 2 short. The woman was holding the kids' hands, walking straight into the water. I yelled, thinking they were real people, but they just kept walking and vanished when they hit the reflection. Police divers searched the river after that report but found nothing. No footprints, no evidence of disturbance, just the smell of rot near the bend." Local folklore has since merged tragedy and superstition. Some say the flood that took Elaine and her children wasn't natural, that it followed weeks of unusual rainfall that locals attributed to the ridge. Curse. A preacher in the 1980s even tried to perform a blessing ceremony there. Witnesses said his Bible turned black with moisture halfway through, as if it had been submerged. The preacher left the state 2 days later, refusing interviews for the rest of his life. Even today, highway patrol logs record the same phrase in multiple reports: audible crying, female, no visual contact. Dashcams sometimes pick up light interference at the exact GPS coordinates of Devil's Bend. One viral clip from a state trooper's vehicle in October 2021 shows a sudden fog bank enveloping the car, followed by faint sobbing on the audio feed. When the fog clears seconds later, a pale figure appears momentarily in the rearview camera, her hands pressed to the window before vanishing. The department officially labeled it a technical malfunction, but the trooper who filed the report later resigned, claiming he'd started hearing crying through his police radio at home. If you ask the people of Caldwell, nestled deep within the Willamette National Forest of Oregon lies a forgotten trailhead known to hikers as Black Hollow, a narrow, fog-swept ravine where the air feels colder than it should. Few maps still show the old campground there. Officially, it was shut down in 1998 after a series of accidental deaths. 3 campers found dead in separate incidents over 5 years. All 3 victims were discovered in nearly the same spot, near the old fire pit by the creek, their tents untouched, their lanterns still burning. Locals say that's how the legend began, the Lantern Man of Black Hollow. The earliest written reference comes from a 1976 Ranger's report, archived by the Oregon Department of Forestry. The ranger, Harold Pritchard, wrote of seeing a man in an oilskin coat carrying a flickering lantern, standing at the base of the ravine long after midnight. When he called out, the figure turned, and the light died instantly. He assumed it was a poacher or lost hiker until he followed the footprints. They stopped halfway up the slope. No drag marks, no struggle. Just ended in the middle of undisturbed soil. For decades, Black Hollow was popular with autumn campers, hunters, couples, college kids, until the accidents began. The first was October 1989, a father and son on a weekend camping trip. Their remains were found 3 days later by search and rescue teams. The father had apparently fallen into the creek and drowned. The boy was found sitting upright against a tree, eyes open, expression frozen in terror. His flashlight was still clutched in one hand, pointing at nothing. When investigators checked the battery, it was dead, completely drained, as though it had been on for hours. The coroner listed shock and exposure as the cause of death. But the rescuers reported something odd. All of the boy's fingernails were packed with damp soil, as if he'd been digging or trying to crawl away from something. After that, the locals stopped going to Black Hollow in fall. Pause. Sound of wind in trees. Faint creaking lantern chain. In 1993, a university research assistant named Sandra Hill conducted an audio survey of the area for her thesis on natural soundscapes. Her field recorder captured what she described as unexplained low-frequency interference. On the tape, just before the distortion, there's the faint sound of a man's voice, distant, almost pleading, whispering, "Keep the fire lit." Her body was found 3 days later at the base of the ravine, lantern beside her still warm. The wick had burned down to the last trace of oil. The sheriff's office ruled it an accident, a fall caused by unstable ground. But her boyfriend later told investigators something she'd said before the trip haunted him. If the light goes out, he'll come. For years, hikers reported seeing the glow of an old lantern deep in the woods, swinging slowly, like someone walking the trail. The glow would appear even when no one was there. In the fall, when the fog came early and the leaves turned black against the sky, campers said the lantern would move between the trees, circling the campsites, always keeping just enough distance to remain hidden. A retired firefighter named Bill Corrigan told the Eugene Chronicle in 2004 that he once followed the light after his group saw it on a hunting trip. It looked like an oil lamp swaying. We thought it was another camper. We followed it for maybe a quarter mile. Then it just stopped. The light hovered there, still as stone. Then we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming toward us. "Heavy boots," we called out, no answer. The light went out and the sound stopped. When we turned back, every lantern at our camp was lit again, even the one we'd left empty. He quit hunting the following week. There's a theory among local historians that the Lantern Man was once a fire warden named Elias Brandt, who vanished in 1934 while checking fire lines during an early frost. According to archived letters, Brandt was a deeply religious man who believed darkness invited wickedness. His final journal entry, recovered from an old ranger outpost decades later, reads, "The night grows long. I must keep the flame. They whisper from the trees wanting me to rest, but I cannot. The light must stay." Since then, every reported sighting of the Lantern Man has one thing in common: the presence of fire. He's drawn to it, appears near it, sometimes extinguishes it. In 2010, a pair of travel vloggers recorded what became one of the most chilling viral clips ever uploaded to Reddit's R Paranormal. In the grainy night vision footage, the camera pans across the forest. A faint light appears in the distance, yellow, flickering. The person filming whispers, "There it is again." The light swings closer, illuminating a tall shape in a long coat. For one brief second, the figure's face flashes across the lens, hollow-eyed, mouth open as if gasping. Then the lantern goes dark, and the video cuts to static. Authorities dismissed it as a hoax. But Reddit users analyzed the metadata. The footage was taken less than a mile from the old Black Hollow campground marker. The uploader deleted their account within 24 hours. Pause, faint dripping, wind through pine needles. Today, the trail to Black Hollow is overgrown, the road leading there blocked by fallen logs. But rangers still find evidence of trespassers. Makeshift campsites, burned-out lanterns, melted candles. One ranger, Jessica Lai, described finding something that made her transfer out of the district entirely. "We found an old lantern hanging from a branch," she said. It was rusted, but the glass was spotless. Inside was a matchbook, one match left. I flicked it open, just curious, and noticed something scratched on the cardboard. "Keep the fire lit." Same words from the 1993 tape. She refused to return to the site after that. Locals around the small town of Oak Ridge still tell campers to avoid the area in October. They say when the fog moves through the hollow, the air smells faintly of kerosene. And if you see a flicker of light beyond your fire, never try to follow it, because the Lantern Man isn't leading you to safety. He's making sure you join him. The story goes that his spirit roams the woods, searching for those who let their fire die, those who left their lanterns cold. He comes to claim their flame, to keep his eternal vigil against the darkness. Some travelers claim to have heard his voice carried by the wind, low and trembling, whispering the same words over and over. "It's getting dark. Keep the fire lit." The Park Service doesn't acknowledge the stories publicly, but in the maintenance logs for Trail Sector 19B, there's an odd note from October 17, 2022. A ranger reported finding a set of footprints in the frost leading away from the blocked path. Large, booted prints, ending halfway up the slope above the creek. Beside them, a still burning lantern. No wick, no fuel, just flame. Pause, faint hiss, fire crackles and fades into wind. Black Hollow remains closed to the public. But sometimes, if you stand near the tree line after dusk, you can still see a light weaving slowly between the trunks, like someone trying to find their way home. Just don't call out to him, because if the Lantern Man turns and looks at you, you'll never see the dawn again. The legend of the Lantern Man isn't just told by locals anymore. It's whispered among park rangers across Oregon, passed quietly between night shift workers and hikers who claim to have seen something they can't explain. In October 2015, the Lane County Sheriff's Department received 3 separate distress calls from hikers in the Willamette Forest, all within a 10-mile radius of Black Hollow. Each call lasted less than a minute before disconnecting. The final recording caught a fragment of a woman's panicked voice saying, "He's here, the light's moving," before the line went dead. A search team was deployed at dawn. They found 2 of the hikers, shaken but alive, near the creek bed. The third, a 26-year-old named Colin Reese, was missing. According to his friends, Colin had wandered off the trail, following what he thought was another camper's lantern. He said he could see it through the fog, one of the survivors recalled. He kept shouting that someone needed help, that the light was signaling him. We tried to stop him, but he just disappeared into the trees. The light went with him. They never found his body, only his backpack and a melted flashlight, its lens warped as though exposed to intense heat. The following week, local newspapers ran the story and dozens of amateur investigators flooded the area, hoping to capture footage of the Lantern Man, one of them, Ethan Calloway. a paranormal YouTuber, posted. The Blue Ridge Parkway is known for its beauty, a 469-mile ribbon of winding asphalt snaking through the Appalachian Mountains, offering sweeping autumn views that can stop your heart. But between mile markers 340 and 356, near Linville Gorge, lies a stretch that locals call the Hollow Between Peaks. In late fall, when the fog descends and the tourist traffic fades, this portion of the parkway becomes eerily silent. The dense forest on both sides forms a canopy that blocks out even moonlight. At night, the air hangs heavy, as if the woods themselves are holding their breath. It's not an officially marked campsite anymore, though once it was, back in the 1960s. The Dunbar Hollow campground stood at the base of a creek near an abandoned ranger station. After a series of disappearances in the early 70s, the Park Service shut it down. Officially, the explanation was rock slide hazards. Unofficially, old rangers tell a different story. One of them, Ranger Walter Reese, recounted in a 1982 local radio interview that he was part of the last search party before the closure. "We found 3 tents," he said, "but only one sleeping bag was unzipped. Food still cooking on the camp stove. The rest of it gone. No prints leading away from the site, no drag marks, no blood. Just gone." He paused, then added quietly, "And the trees. The bark was scored all up and down like something had been climbing or scraping." For years afterward, hikers whispered about screams echoing through the gorge late at night, especially during the fall months. One hiker, a woman named Sarah Beck, recorded audio in 2004 of what she described as crying or chanting coming from the hollow below her camp. The tape was analyzed by a wildlife biologist who concluded it didn't match any known animal vocalization native to the park. Sarah's recording was posted online under the title Voices in the Gorge, but the original file was mysteriously deleted a year later after her disappearance during a solo trip in the same region. The most disturbing account, however, comes from a pair of campers in 2016, Jacob and Lila, a couple from Asheville who had decided to take a late October weekend away from the city. The parkway was nearly empty that weekend. Rain had rolled through earlier that day, and the forest floor was slick with fallen leaves. They set up camp near the old ranger station ruins, unaware that they were inside what the maps now simply labeled restricted area. Jacob recalled the first night vividly in his statement to authorities. "The fog was unreal. You couldn't see 10 feet beyond the tent. We kept hearing what sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. Not deer, too heavy. I remember whispering to Lila, asking if she heard it too. She nodded but said maybe it was branches falling." They drifted into uneasy sleep, only to be jolted awake around 2 a.m. by the unmistakable sound of knocking. 3 slow taps on the metal side of their cooler outside the tent. Then silence. Jacob unzipped the flap just enough to peer out with his flashlight, but the beam illuminated only gray mist. He swore later that he heard breathing, steady, deep, somewhere just beyond the light's reach. By morning, everything seemed normal again. The forest was quiet, if unnaturally so. They found large handprints in the damp soil near their fire pit, not animal, but human-sized, with long, narrow fingers that seemed wrong somehow, as if the joints bent slightly the wrong way. Leela wanted to leave immediately. Jacob convinced her to stay one more night, joking that they'd just spooked themselves. That decision would haunt him forever. The second night, the fog returned heavier than before, blanketing the camp in near total silence. Even the usual nighttime sounds, crickets, owls, the rustle of small animals, were absent. Lila was already half asleep when Jacob heard it again, the slow knocking, this time from the opposite side of the tent. He froze, then another knock, closer, and a whisper that he could swear came from just behind his ear, though no one was inside the tent with them. "Cold tonight," it said. Jacob turned on his flashlight, fumbling, shaking. The beam cut across the fabric of the tent, and for just a second, he saw the silhouette of a figure pressed against it from outside. Tall, thin, its head cocked unnaturally to one side, fingers dragging along the nylon with a soft scraping sound. He shouted and burst out of the tent, but there was nothing there. Only fog and trees. He circled the site with his light. No footprints this time, no signs of intrusion. When he went back inside, Lila was sitting upright, trembling. She pointed to the tent wall. The inside of the fabric, where the silhouette had been, was wet, but not from rain. It was a dark, oily smear that smelled faintly of decay. They packed up at first light and left everything but the tent behind. When Jacob returned 2 days later with park rangers, the tent was still there. But every tree around the site, every single one, had deep, claw-like marks in the bark, all about 8 feet off the ground, as if something tall had been circling the camp. Lila never spoke about it again. They broke up a few months later, and according to Jacob's later interviews, she developed an intense aversion to mirrors and reflective surfaces. She said she saw the hollow behind her in the glass, he told a podcast in 2020, even when she was home. Locals believe that Dunbar Hollow is haunted by something older than the campground itself, an entity tied to the mountains. The Cherokee once called that area Nu-Nyahi Tsusti, which roughly translates to the Silent One's ground. Legends described spirits who moved through mist and watched travelers from between the trees. Not evil exactly, but jealous of those who stayed too long. Since 2016, there have been at least 6 reports of campers hearing the same slow knocking around their sites. Park officials continue to attribute it to falling branches or black bears, but those who've been there at night say otherwise. They describe the same unnatural quiet, the same sense of being watched, the same faint whisper just before dawn. Cold tonight, and every autumn just before the first frost. Rangers find new claw marks on the trees around the old campground, always fresh, always high above human reach. To this day, no one camps in Dunbar Hollow twice. When investigators began looking into the disappearances surrounding Dunbar Hollow, many of them started with the assumption that it was just a dangerous piece of land, a mixture of steep drops, sudden fog, and disoriented hikers. But as the years went on, a different picture began to emerge. Park Ranger Harold Trent, who patrolled that region in the late 80s, kept a journal of strange events that were never filed in his official reports. When his daughter found it after his death in 2013, she turned the entries over to a local historian. They were filled with fragmented observations that painted a disturbing pattern. October 9th, 1987, 03:12 a.m. Heard a woman crying from the hollow. Took my light and went down Trail B. No one there. Found a lantern hanging on a branch, still lit. Checked the registry. No campers this week. October 11th, 1987, 02:40 a.m. Dreamt of trees moving. Woke up sweating. There was something standing behind the glass at the ranger station window. Couldn't see the face. Just long fingers tapping. October 14th, 1987, 04:09 a.m. The forest's too quiet. I keep thinking I hear my name from down the creek. Walter told me to ignore it. Says they're not calling me, they're calling through me. After that entry, there was nothing but blank pages. Trent transferred. Posts 2 weeks later and never went back to the Blue Ridge section. The mention of calling through would come up again decades later when a paranormal research group called the Appalachia Echo Project visited Dunbar Hollow in 2019. They were investigating what they believed were acoustic anomalies, natural infrasound frequencies caused by the valley's unique shape. Low-frequency vibrations, they argued, could induce hallucinations or a sense of dread. But what they captured went far beyond vibration. Their night vision footage shows the team setting up recording equipment near the old ranger station ruins. Around 1:47 a.m., the audio picks up what sounds like a woman whispering. The words are faint but distinct. Through you. At first, they assumed it was one of the crew talking off camera until the infrared camera panned toward the source of the sound. No one was there. The voice seemed to come from the fog itself. Seconds later, a sharp metallic clang echoed from deep in the hollow, like a shovel striking rock. When the crew ran toward it, their equipment cut out entirely. No radio, no camera feed, nothing but static. The next morning, they recovered the gear and left. When they reviewed the remaining audio files, they found nearly 40 minutes of white noise, except for one section, just before the feed died. A man's voice, one of their own crew, could be heard softly repeating, "Cold tonight," though no one remembered saying it. That same year, a local folklorist named Professor Ellen Cade from Appalachian State University began collecting oral histories from nearby residents. Many of the older locals refused to talk about Dunbar Hollow directly, referring to it only as the still place. Those who did speak claimed the site had once been a burial area for the Nunyahi, supernatural beings from Cherokee legend described as in. The Manistee National Forest in western Michigan stretches across nearly 500,000 acres of dense pine, cedar swamps, and old logging trails that vanish into nowhere. In summer, it's a paradise for campers and hikers, but in the fall, when the forest goes silent and frost creeps along the ground, it becomes something else entirely. Locals talk about a place near the old Pine Barrens camp, a defunct logging site from the 1930s that once housed dozens of lumbermen. The logging operation was shut down after what's still referred to as the Autumn Collapse. In October 1938, 8 men went missing over the span of 2 weeks. The survivors reported hearing voices in the wind at night, soft at first, then unmistakably human. They described them as like whispers buried under snow. When authorities finally searched the camp, they found the men's cabins frozen solid, though the temperatures had barely dropped below freezing. Their food was untouched. Their axes were still embedded in tree trunks. The only clue was a trail of footprints leading away from camp, barefoot, descending into the swamp, before simply stopping at the edge of a frozen pond. No bodies were ever found. The official cause of death was listed as exposure, though even the investigators noted how unnaturally fast the frost had spread across the area that night. The pond itself was solid ice by morning, thick enough to walk on despite the mild weather the day before. Locals later said it was as if the forest exhaled something cold enough to stop life mid-step. Decades later, Pine Barrens Camp became a popular ghost hunting destination. Most came back with little more than stories about weird sounds and dead radios. But one group of college students in 1997 found something that would reignite the legend. Their trip began like a joke, a Halloween dare. 4 students from Grand Valley State University, Dean, Marcus, Rachel, and Lacey, camped near the site of the old lumber cabins to record EVP sessions. According to Dean's recovered journal, the forest felt too still from the moment they arrived. "No birds," he wrote. "Even the air feels muffled." That night, they set up a single tent near the remains of a fire pit. Around 11 p.m., Marcus reported seeing faint lights moving between the trees. Like flashlights, but blue. Thinking it was another group of campers, they shouted, but no one replied. The lights vanished. Then the temperature dropped. "We could see our breath," Rachel later told investigators. But there was no wind, no cold front. It just changed. Their audio recorder began picking up faint static, followed by a voice none of them recognized. It whispered a name, Lacey, though Lacey herself was across the tent and heard nothing. The others insisted they heard it clearly, coming from the recorder itself, as if the voice were inside the speaker, not around them. By 2 a.m., the group was terrified enough to pack their gear and leave. They never made it back to their car. Search teams found their tent collapsed and torn open. Dean's journal was half buried in snow despite the clear sky. The last entry read, "Something's in the pond." Marcus says he saw faces under the ice. "We keep hearing our names." Rachel won't stop crying. Lacey's gone. The pond he mentioned was the same one where the loggers' footprints had ended 60 years earlier. When police arrived, they found fresh footprints leading to the edge, barefoot even though temperatures were near freezing. They ended abruptly at the water's edge, just as before. Divers were sent in. But the pond floor was only 2 feet deep. Nothing there but mud, roots, and a single child's mitten preserved under a layer of frost. Only Rachel survived. She was found the next day, wandering along Highway 55, barefoot and incoherent. Her skin temperature was dangerously low, as though she'd been outside for days. When she finally recovered enough to speak, she kept repeating the same sentence, "They know your name if you listen." She refused to elaborate and never returned to school. After that, Pine Barrens was officially closed to camping. But that didn't stop people from trying. Amateur investigators, ghost hunters, and YouTubers have all gone searching for the frozen whispers. Some claim to hear faint cries across the pond when the air is still. Others say they've recorded voices calling their names through wind distortion, the same phenomenon described by the missing loggers decades earlier. In 2011, a hiker named Caleb Morton went viral for posting a 15-minute video titled "The Ice That Breathes." The footage shows Caleb standing on the edge of a partially frozen pond at dusk. The air is foggy, his breath visible. As he pans the camera, the ice begins to crack in long, slow lines across the surface, though the temperature that day was above 40 degrees Celsius. The cracks form concentric circles, almost deliberately, radiating outward from where he stands. Then, faintly, a woman's voice whispers, "Caleb." He drops the camera, which lands facing the water. A tall, shadowed reflection moves just beneath the surface. Not a face, but something long and spindly, gliding like smoke under the ice. Then the video cuts out. Caleb disappeared that same night. His phone and keys were found beside his abandoned car 3 miles away. The video was uploaded automatically to his cloud account. Timestamped at 2:03 a.m., local tribes in Michigan, particularly the Ottawa, have old stories about winter spirits that mimic human voices, beings that dwell beneath frozen lakes and feed on the warmth of breath and sound. The elders call them Mikwanaki, which means the whisperers. They were said to emerge during the first frost of the season, drawn to those who spoke their own names near still water. When a local reporter asked one Ottawa elder, Evelyn Noden, about Pine Barrens, she simply shook her head. "That place remembers hunger," she said. "It doesn't stop because you paved roads around it, even now." Park rangers report that temperatures in that small section of the forest can drop suddenly, sometimes by as much as 15 degrees, without any weather change. Radio static is common, compasses spin. The air feels heavier, as if laden with moisture that never quite turns to fog. And in autumn, when the last campers pack up and the forest prepares for winter, the whispers start again. Hikers say it sounds like the wind brushing through the pines, but those who've stayed longer, who dared to listen, claim the wind begins to form words. Sometimes it calls your name. Sometimes it calls someone else's. But once you hear it, it never truly stops. Ranger reports from 2023 confirm that even now, the pond occasionally freezes overnight, even when temperatures remain above freezing. The next morning, faint shapes can sometimes be seen under the ice. Faces, some say, though rangers insist it's just leaves and shadows. Yet one ranger, speaking anonymously, admitted something different in a late-night call to a podcast. "I've seen the ice move. Not melt, move, like something was breathing underneath." The government now lists Pine Barrens Camp as environmentally unstable, but locals know better. They say the forest breathes cold each autumn, searching for voices that will answer back. So if you ever find yourself hiking near Manistee National Forest and stumble upon a quiet pond ringed with pines, don't speak. Don't call out. Don't even whisper your own name, because once the ice knows it, it keeps it. And when the wind turns cold, it may call it back. The legend of Pine Barrens didn't fade after the college disappearances. It evolved. In the early 2000s, online forums and late-night radio shows began circulating grainy photographs and sound clips allegedly captured in the Manistee woods. What was once dismissed as ghost stories became a genuine subject of investigation among both paranormal researchers and environmental scientists. One of the most notable cases came from a Forest Service technician named Aaron Myers, who was assigned to restore old logging roads around the site in 2008. His report, filed under anomalous temperature variance, remains partially redacted, but enough was leaked to the public to fuel speculation for years. October 17, 2008, Pine Barrens Sector 4B recorded temperature drop from 44 degree years to 23 degree years in less than 3 minutes. No wind shift detected. Frost accumulation began on equipment surfaces. Heard what sounded like distant conversation through radio static. Words unclear, but cadence human. Transmission not identified. Aaron was later interviewed anonymously by the Northern Watch podcast. He said he remembered feeling his chest tighten as the air grew heavy, like breathing through cold glass. Then, through the radio earpiece, he heard a voice whispering his name. At first he assumed it was one of the crew, but when he asked, no one. There's a stretch of forest deep within the Appalachian foothills of Tennessee where the air turns strangely cold after sundown, even in the warmth of early fall. The locals call it Hollow Creek, a place long abandoned by regular campers. Officially, it's listed as part of a decommissioned state park, closed after a string of disappearances in the late 1990s. But to those who grew up in the surrounding towns, it's known for something much older, an old legend whispered around campfires for generations. the woman who walks without sound. The story of Hollow Creek begins long before the disappearances, back in 1932, when a small settlement of logging families worked the hillsides. One of them was a woman named Clara Dean, the wife of a lumberman who was killed in a sawmill accident. When the company refused to compensate her, Clara stayed behind in the forest alone, surviving in a shack near the creek. Locals said she began to wander the woods at night, singing lullabies that echoed through the trees, her voice carried by the wind. One bitterly cold November night, her cabin caught fire. By the time neighbors arrived, nothing remained but ashes and an unrecognizable body by the hearth. No one could confirm it was Clara, and that's when the sightings began. Truckers who used the old gravel service road that once ran through the park began reporting a pale woman standing near the creek bend, her dress soaked, her face half hidden by hair. They said she didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe, until you passed her headlights. Then she'd vanish. Fast forward to October 1999. 3 college students from Knoxville, Brandon, Elise, and Jared, drove up to Hollow Creek for a weekend of camping. They'd read online about the ghost stories and wanted to make a Halloween short film. They arrived before dusk, filmed their tents being set up, and recorded a few jokes about finding Clara. Their last known footage begins around 9:42 p.m. The video starts with Brandon holding the camera as they walk toward the creek, flashlights cutting through the fog. Elise says something about hearing humming. The audio crackles, but a faint voice can be heard. A woman's voice, low, rhythmic, like a tune carried from the distance. Jared jokes it's just the wind, but then the voice grows louder, clearer, as if someone were standing right beside them, singing directly into the microphone. The footage ends abruptly with the sound of running and Brandon's panicked breathing. His flashlight jerks toward the water, briefly illuminating a white figure standing knee-deep in the creek, hair plastered to her face. Then static. 2 days later, park rangers found their campsite still standing. The tents were intact, the fire still smoldering, food uneaten, but there was no sign of the students. Brandon's camcorder was recovered from the mud near the water, half submerged. The final 90 seconds of footage were corrupted, save for one clear frame, a blurred female silhouette reflected on the creek's surface. Over the years, Hollow Creek became a name whispered among true crime investigators and paranormal enthusiasts alike. Some say the students got lost and drowned, though the bodies were never found. Others claim the creek hides something far older, a curse that took Clara Dean and anyone foolish enough to call her name. In 2013, a wildlife officer named Henry Mathers was assigned to survey the closed park for illegal hunting. In his report dated November 2nd, he wrote, "Around 1:15 a.m. I stopped near the Old Creek Bridge. The air temperature dropped suddenly. My radio lost signal. Then I saw a light, a small lantern flickering across the water. I called out, thinking maybe it was a trespasser. No response. The light dimmed, then disappeared into the fog. When I approached, I saw wet footprints on the bridge leading away from the creek, then stopping midway. They just stopped." He left the site immediately and filed his resignation 2 weeks later. Today, Hollow Creek remains fenced off, though the chain link is rusted and easy to slip through. Locals still hear singing from the woods on calm autumn nights, especially when the mist rolls down from the hills. Hunters say they sometimes find wet prints near the creek's edge, bare feet, always leading toward the water, never away. And if you go there in late October, when the trees burn orange and gold, the air itself feels heavy, as though it remembers what happened. They say if you whisper Clara's name 3 times, you'll hear her lullaby in return, soft, almost kind, until you realize the voice is directly behind you. When the disappearances hit the news, Hollow Creek became a national headline for exactly 1 week before fading into the background of late 90s hysteria about urban legends and Blair Witch-style hoaxes. But among investigators in the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the case file still circulates as one of their most haunting unsolved mysteries. Detective Rachel Dunn, now retired, was the first to review the student footage frame by frame. In her 2001 interview for the local paper, the Knoxville Ledger, she said, "It wasn't just the image of the woman that bothered me. It was the sound right before the static. If you slow it down, you can hear someone whisper 'stay', not shouted, not mechanical, but clear as if someone was standing right next to the microphone. The audio specialists could never prove it was tampered with." The word "stay" still exists in the TBI archives, buried within 6 seconds of static. Later that same year, a pair of hunters, brothers named Rick and Malcolm Porter, claimed to have stumbled upon something unsettling near the same creek. They found 3 wooden crosses, roughly carved, sticking out of the mud in a perfect triangle formation. One of them had the initials BD crudely scratched into it, along with a date, 10/31/99. That was Halloween night, the same night the students vanished. The Porters reported their discovery, and a search was conducted. Divers combed the creek bed and found nothing but a layer of silt and branches. Yet, divers swore the water turned inexplicably colder near the center, dropping almost 20 degrees in seconds. One of them, Frank Dillard, quit the team after that dive, telling reporters, "I don't care what anyone says. Something brushed past my leg down there, like hair floating in the current. I came up and it felt like someone's hands were still on my ankle." In 2004, an anonymous online forum post appeared from someone calling themselves Elise's brother. The post read like a confession of guilt. He claimed the students hadn't gone there for a short film at all, but to perform a summoning ritual they found on an occult website. It required calling a lost soul by name at the hour of its death and offering a token of regret, something stolen. The brother claimed Elise took a silver locket from a display case at the local museum that once belonged to Clara Dean. The museum confirmed a theft had occurred that same week, but couldn't identify the suspect. The locket, however, was found years later. In 2011, a fisherman discovered it tangled in roots near the creek's edge. Inside, the faded photograph of a man's face had been scratched away until only the outline of his jaw remained. Locals have since reported other strange occurrences. Campers on nearby private property have awakened to the sound of dripping water inside their tents despite no rain, their sleeping bags damp, smelling faintly of smoke. Others claim to have seen lantern light moving across the tree line, too steady and bright to be a firefly, too silent to be another person. A trucker named Evan Rhodes, who parked his rig off Route 321 one autumn night in 2018, called the police to report a woman in white walking in front of my truck. By the time officers arrived, there were no footprints, but Rhodes insisted. She looked right at me through the windshield, and her lips moved like she was singing. Then she blinked out, like she fell backward into the dark. That same night, the dash cam from his truck captured a brief flicker, a pale figure reflected in the glass, hair streaming as if underwater. The Hollow Creek site remains fenced, but the fence does little. Teenagers still sneak in with flashlights and cameras every October, hoping to catch Clara Dean's ghost. Some claim success, though the images are always grainy, warped by fog. Those who study the folklore say the legend of the Soundless Woman predates Clara herself, possibly tracing back to Cherokee tales of a river spirit that collects the souls of the lost. According to that version, the woman by the creek is not the ghost of a grieving widow, but a lure, a mimic that takes the voice of those who died near water and sings to pull others in. The police file on the 1999 case remains open, though inactive. Every few years, hikers find new crosses in the mud, always. The Northern California redwoods are older than most civilizations, towering columns of time and silence. Their bark carries the scent of resin and rain, and when the wind moves through them, it sounds like 1,000 voices whispering from another age. Deep within that emerald wilderness lies a stretch of forest known to locals as Redwood Hollow, a place that never appears on modern park maps anymore. It used to be part of a logging settlement, then a campground, then nothing at all. Abandoned. After the fall of 1975, when 6 campers vanished without a sound, the Redwood Hollow tragedy is still one of the most quietly unsettling cases in California's forgotten history. It began as an ordinary long weekend in late October, when the Bowers family, 2 parents, their teenage daughter, and 3 of her friends, set out for a camping trip. The group checked in at the ranger station near Crescent City, signed the logbook at 5:42 p.m., and were never seen again. When rangers found their site 4 days later, everything appeared normal. The tents were still zipped, food laid out, campfire burned down to ash. But there was one strange detail. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no insects, not even the faint rush of wind. The rangers' first assumption was carbon monoxide poisoning or a bear attack, but there were no signs of struggle, and all 6 sleeping bags were empty. The only oddity was a single line carved into the bark of a fallen redwood near the site: "Do not follow the quiet." That phrase became the obsession of a local journalist named Peter Callahan, who spent nearly 2 years researching the disappearances. In a 1977 issue of the Humboldt Chronicle, he wrote that the hollow had long been associated with stories of the still men, faceless silhouettes said to appear in the fog when the forest goes completely silent. According to loggers from the 1920s, the silence was a warning. One entry from a foreman's notebook, dated 1928, reads, "Sound just stopped. No saws, no birds, nothing. The men refused to move. Said if we walked into that quiet, we'd never come out again." The area was eventually fenced off and absorbed by the growing national forest boundary. Over time, the legend of Redwood Hollow faded until the summer of 2009, when a group of hikers unintentionally revived it. 3 college friends from San Francisco, Mark, Dana, and Tristan, decided to go off-trail during a backpacking trip. Mark was a photography major and wanted a shot of the fog settling over the old-growth redwoods. Their GPS failed halfway through the hike, but they found an old dirt path that seemed to lead deeper into the forest. By dusk, the soundscape had changed. Dana later told park investigators, "We were joking about how loud the forest was, birds, wind, twigs snapping. Then, all at once, it stopped. Every sound just died. You could hear your own heartbeat." Mark switched on his camera, saying he wanted to record the moment, but the audio refused to capture anything. Complete digital silence, as if the forest were absorbing the noise. A minute later, they saw shapes moving between the trees. Not animals, not people exactly, just darker patches of shadow that seemed to shift when you blinked. Tristan panicked and started yelling for help. Dana grabbed Mark's arm and said, "Don't run." Then a whisper, almost gentle, echoed through the air, "Stay." That was the last anyone saw of Mark, and 2 days later, Dana and Tristan were found wandering a forest road, covered in scratches and mud. They had no memory of how they got there. When questioned, both described hearing footsteps following them through the silence but never seeing anyone. Mark's camera was discovered half buried in moss near the campsite. The memory card was corrupted, save for one photograph, an overexposed image of the trees streaked with light. But in the corner, near the base of one trunk, something faintly humanoid seemed to stand. The forestry department blamed their ordeal on exhaustion and exposure. The official report labeled the missing man a presumed fatality. Yet in the years since, there have been dozens of similar reports. Solo campers disappearing, hikers returning days later with missing time, drone footage that cuts out completely when flown over Redwood Hollow. In 2015, a park ranger named Elias Monroe conducted an unauthorized night patrol into the hollow. His dash cam recorded 3 hours of uneventful footage until a faint vibration began to shake the lens. Then, total silence. The engine idled. His breathing slowed and a single phrase was heard through his body mic. "Do you hear it?" The video ended there. The ranger's truck was found abandoned the next morning, headlights still on, driver's door open. Monroe was never found. Researchers who study infrasound phenomena say the redwoods can create low-frequency vibrations capable of affecting human perception, inducing panic, hallucinations, even blackouts. But locals insist the forest itself is haunted, a pocket of stillness that hungers for sound, for life, for breath. Those who dare to visit Redwood Hollow today describe the same unnatural calm that falls just before something happens. A silence so deep you can feel it pressing on your eardrums. A silence that waits. When night falls and the fog moves between the trunks, they say you can sometimes see movement at the edge of your vision. Figures standing just beyond the light, watching. But if you try to speak, to call out, no sound will leave your mouth. The forest takes your voice first, then your breath, then your name, and in the hush that follows, the redwoods listen. Months after Ranger Elias Monroe's disappearance, Redwood Hollow was officially classified as a restricted research zone. The official statement cited unstable terrain and treefall hazards. But anyone who's ever been there knows the truth. The land isn't unstable. It's unnerving. For decades, whispers about the hollow have traveled quietly between the rangers and old-timers who work the coastal logging routes. Some believe the stillness is a natural phenomenon, a pocket of dead air caused by pressure systems trapped among the canyons. Others say it's something older, a wound in the earth itself. In early 2017, a local journalist named Rebecca Hale took it upon herself to investigate. Her podcast, Echoes in the Pines, chronicled what she called the vanishing hum of Redwood Hollow. She interviewed survivors, forestry staff, and the families of the missing. One of her most haunting interviews was with Dana Reed, one of the two survivors from the 2009 trip. Her voice shook throughout the recording. When it got quiet, it wasn't like silence. It was heavy. You could feel it in your lungs pressing down. Mark said he heard water dripping, but there was no stream. Then I saw him look past me, and his face, it changed. Like he recognized something. Then he was just gone. When Hale asked her what she meant by gone, Dana paused for over 10 seconds before whispering, "I mean, he folded out of sight, like the trees swallowed him." The podcast episode was pulled offline a week later. The reason given was distress caused to the interview subject, but Hale's notes, later found in her abandoned office, told a different story. In the margins of her field notebook, beneath a coffee stain, she had written, "The forest mimics sound. My recorder played my own voice when I was alone." The deeper she went, the stranger her evidence became. Several of her field recordings contained noises below the human hearing range, deep, resonant tones lasting seconds at a time. The Utah desert holds silence differently than the forest. It's dry, electric, and endless, the kind that hums in your ears like pressure from another world. Just off Highway 191 near Monticello lies Devil's Canyon, a sandstone maze of cliffs and red dust. It's a place where travelers stop for one night under the stars and leave before sunrise, without ever understanding why the dark feels heavier there. The campground was built in the 1960s as part of a scenic route project to draw tourists through the desert. But by the mid-1980s, the site had already earned a reputation no brochure would mention. The locals said the canyon had once been used as a burial ground for outlaw gangs in the 1800s, men who robbed stagecoaches and hid their loot in the caves before vanishing into the sandstorms. Old-timers claimed their spirits still roamed the gulches, whispering through the rocks when the wind picked up. But something changed in 1986. That year, a group of amateur archaeologists from Salt Lake City set up camp near the canyon rim to explore an old mine shaft rumored to hold stolen silver. The group included Professor Daniel Armitage, 2 graduate students, and a local guide named Roy Keller. Their journals, later recovered by park rangers, described strange occurrences almost from the moment they arrived. Heard something outside tent after midnight, like someone dragging a chain through the sand. Roy swears he saw lantern light down in the ravine, but there's no one else here. Woke up to find small handprints on the cooler, not animal. On the third night, Armitage descended into the shaft while the others remained topside. Keller's account, taken by police days later, is the only surviving testimony. "We lowered the professor down on a harness. He radioed once, said he'd reached the bottom, that it opened into a tunnel. Then the radio made this crackling sound, like breathing. He started shouting something. 'Don't move! Don't move!' And then the line went slack. They pulled the rope back up. The harness was empty, the clips melted as if exposed to heat. When the others tried to flee, a sandstorm rolled in, sudden and violent. Keller said he could barely see 5 feet ahead, but through the dust he saw shapes moving between the rocks, pale outlines like figures made of smoke. Their eyes, he said, were black voids that swallowed the flashlight beams. Only Keller made it out. The others were never found. The police labeled it a geological collapse, though no debris was ever recovered. A year later, hikers discovered Armitage's camera half buried near the canyon floor. The film, mostly ruined, contained one surviving frame, a tunnel wall covered in handprints, all pointing inward. After that, Devil's Canyon Campground became a ghost stop. RV travelers passing through the region often report flickering lights deep in the ravines at night, too far from any road. The local sheriff's office receives 2 or 3 calls every year from campers claiming to hear voices echoing across the canyon walls. One ranger, Tom Elliott, described his experience in a 2002 interview for the Utah Historical Society. "I was doing a perimeter check around midnight. The moonlight hit the rocks just right, and I saw shadows moving down below, like people walking in a circle. When I called out, they stopped, and then I realized I could see right through them." Elliott quit 6 months later. In 2014, a pair of tourists from Denver uploaded a shaky phone video of what they believed was paranormal activity in Devil's Canyon. The clip, less than a minute long, shows their campfire surrounded by complete blackness. Then, faintly, whispering begins. Multiple voices, low and overlapping. One of the tourists laughs nervously and pans the camera around. For an instant, several faces appear reflected in the glass window of their camper, faces that don't belong to either of them. The video ends with static and a single audible word: return. Folklorists now connect the Devil's Canyon legend with older indigenous stories about the coyote spirits, tricksters who lured travelers into the desert and trapped them in stone prisons. Some believe the mine shafts and canyons act as resonating chambers, amplifying not just sound, but memory. Those who've camped there in recent years tell eerily consistent stories. They hear footsteps circling their tents long after midnight, always stopping just beyond the edge of the firelight. Others describe feeling pulled toward the canyon's edge by whispers promising to show them where the gold sleeps. In 2021, a YouTube explorer named Noah King live-streamed his solo overnight stay at Devil's Canyon. Viewers watched for 3 hours as he documented strange noises and shadows moving across the sand. Then at 2:17 a.m., the camera suddenly tilted upward toward the stars and froze. Noah's voice came through the mic, barely a whisper. "It's not wind, it's calling." The stream ended there. His car was found abandoned near the entrance, keys still in the ignition. Authorities never located him. To this day, Devil's Canyon Campground remains open, technically. But locals say you can tell who stayed there by the way they talk about the silence afterward. They describe it as magnetic, almost intelligent, like the canyon is listening, waiting for you to say something foolish enough to draw it closer. The desert doesn't echo like the forest does. It absorbs, it keeps what it's given. And when night falls across Devil's Canyon, the wind that slides between the red cliffs sounds almost human, like someone exhaling softly in the dark, trying not to be heard. The next morning, after Daniel's encounter, the forest was quiet, eerily so. The air was thick with mist that curled low between the pines, and the ground, once covered in crunchy leaves, now felt damp and spongy beneath his boots. He walked toward the lake, the same lake where he'd seen the ripples spreading in perfect circles the night before. The surface was still, unnaturally reflective, like glass. He crouched by the water's edge, brushing aside a cluster of pine needles, when something caught his eye. A faint handprint in the mud. It was small, child-sized, but unnervingly perfect. No smudge, no drag marks, just the outline of fingers pressed into the earth, as if frozen in time. The handprint was deep, too deep for such a small hand. When he touched the soil, the ground was cold, colder than the air, almost icy. His breath came out in short bursts as a low ripple disturbed the mirrored surface again. This time, he didn't wait to see what caused it. He stood backing away slowly. Later that day, a park ranger stopped by his site. The ranger was in his 50s, with a weary look that suggested he'd seen too much in these woods. "Morning," he said, scanning Daniel's campsite. "You the only one here last night?" Daniel nodded. "Heard some kids, I think, singing." The ranger's eyes flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. "You must have heard echoes," he replied, voice tightening. "Sound carries strange here." He lingered, then added quietly, "You staying another night?" Daniel hesitated. "Maybe. Why?" The ranger's lips pressed into a thin line. "Just, if you do, don't go near the lake after dark." That night, Daniel couldn't shake the ranger's words. The forest seemed heavier, as if the trees leaned in closer. Around 11 p.m., he heard the song again, this time clearer. The Appalachian Mountains hold stories older than the soil itself, legends of settlers, spirits, and shadows that never left. Deep within Kentucky's stretch of the range lies Devil's Backbone Ridge, a narrow, winding corridor of forest where the wind howls like a living thing. The locals say that if you camp there in the fall, when the leaves turn to fire and the nights fall silent, you'll hear whispers coming from the tents that no one's sleeping in. It's not a place most hikers reach by accident. The trail is barely marked, and the last signpost rusted away years ago. Yet, for a pair of avid backpackers, Michael and Elena, it was exactly the kind of challenge they were looking for. They arrived in early October when the days were crisp and gold, and the nights sharp enough to make every breath visible. They pitched their small green tent beside an old stone fire ring and watched the sunset stain the horizon crimson. Everything was quiet, but not peaceful. The silence here felt thick, like the forest was holding its breath. As darkness fell, Michael noticed something strange, faint sounds drifting through the trees. At first it was just the rustle of leaves, but then he realized it wasn't the wind. It was voices. Low, hushed, rhythmic, like a group murmuring prayers. He stepped out of the tent, scanning the shadows. "Hello," he called. His breath fogged the air and the forest swallowed his voice. No answer, just the whispering, circling, moving. Elena unzipped the tent behind him. "What is it?" "People," he whispered. "Out there." She frowned. "There's no one for miles." But the voices grew louder, threading between the trees. Distinct now, though he couldn't understand the words. It was like hearing a language underwater, words pulled apart and twisted. Michael shined his flashlight toward the noise, and for an instant he saw movement. A figure, maybe two, standing between the trunks. When the light hit, they vanished. The couple didn't sleep that night. Every time they closed their eyes, the voices started again. Sometimes they came from the woods, sometimes from behind the tent, sometimes, most disturbingly, from inside it. By dawn, the forest was still again. They packed quickly, eager to leave, but when they turned to take down the tent, Elena froze. "Michael," she whispered, "look." There were handprints on the fabric. Dozens of them. Small, large, smeared. But they weren't dirt, they were ash. The smell hit them next, burnt pine, faint and acrid. That's when Michael noticed something near the fire pit. The ground had been disturbed. He brushed away the leaves and found old, charred stones buried beneath. It wasn't a fire ring. It was the remains of a cabin foundation. He later learned from a park ranger that the site used to be a settlement back in the early 1900s. A religious commune, the ranger said, that vanished after a fire. Locals found the site months later, he told them. Just blackened earth. Every tent burned. No bodies. Michael went pale. "Tents?" "Yeah, they used canvas shelters instead of cabins." People said they heard them whispering prayers all night before the fire. Some think they said it themselves, to purify the ridge. That night, despite their fear, Michael and Elena stayed in a motel 20 miles away. But at 3 a.m., Elena woke up shivering. The air in the room had gone cold, unnaturally cold, and from outside the window came that same sound. Whispering. She turned on the light. There on the glass were fingerprints, smudged in black soot. They checked out before sunrise. Today, Devil's Backbone Ridge is listed on most maps as restricted due to unstable terrain. But hikers who stray too close report hearing things in the trees, muffled voices like dozens of people murmuring at once. Park patrols sometimes find traces of campfires in the clearing, even though no one's supposed to be there. And when it rains, the water runs black down the ridge, carrying the faint scent of ash and pine. Those who've camped there claim the whispers aren't random, they're warnings. And if you listen closely, through the hiss of the wind, you can hear a single phrase repeated over and over: "Stay in your tent." Because once you step outside to investigate the voices, you'll never make it back inside again. The road away from Devil's Backbone Ridge twisted through miles of silent timberland, but for Michael and Elena, it felt like the forest was still watching. The motel was supposed to be their safety net, a clean, fluorescent space far from the whispering woods. But that illusion cracked the moment the cold seeped into the room. Elena sat frozen, staring at the black fingerprints on the window. They weren't normal smudges. Each print was slightly elongated, as if the flesh had melted. The streaks dragged downward, tapering off like claw marks. When she wiped one with a tissue, it left behind fine black dust that smelled faintly of smoke and something metallic. Michael tried to brush it off. Maybe the exhaust from the heater vent, he muttered, but his voice was hollow. He double-checked the locks, then turned on the TV for noise. Static, every channel. They didn't sleep. When morning finally came, they packed in silence and left before dawn broke over the horizon. The motel clerk didn't even look up when they handed over the key, just stared at the counter and muttered, "You folks went up the ridge, didn't you?" Michael froze. "What do you mean?" The clerk's lips tightened. "You smell like it. That's smoke. Happens every fall. Folks wander too close and come back. Different." He wouldn't elaborate. They drove for hours back toward civilization. Yet even on the open highway, they felt the unease clinging to them. The faint scent of burnt pine lingering in the truck. The constant sensation of being watched through the rearview mirror. It wasn't until they stopped for gas outside Lexington that Elena noticed something chilling. In the side mirror, she saw their reflection, but behind them, barely visible through the tinted rear window, were faint outlines, like silhouettes of people sitting upright in the truck bed. Still, watching. When she turned around, the truck bed was empty. That night, after they returned home, they tried to resume normal life. But the nightmares started almost immediately. Michael would wake drenched in sweat, swearing he could hear whispering right outside their window. Elena began sleepwalking, once found standing in the backyard at 2 a.m. Her feet blackened as if she'd been walking through soot. 3 days later, Michael found something impossible, their camping tent, which they had left behind on the ridge, sitting in their garage. It was folded neatly, but the outer fabric was charred and brittle. Inside lay a handful of pine needles and a small, round stone with strange carvings etched into it, symbols that looked ancient, almost runic. They took it to a local historian at the University of Kentucky, who examined the markings under magnification. "It's Appalachian folk sigil work," she explained. "Protection glyphs, used by early settlers against hauntings." She looked uneasy. "But these are drawn backward. Inversion spells. They invite spirits instead of keeping them out." That night, the whispers returned. Not from the forest this time, but from inside the tent. Michael had set it in the garage, zipped shut. Around midnight, they both heard it. The low, rhythmic murmur of many voices whispering together. Elena begged him not to go, but Michael, ever the rational one, grabbed a flashlight and crept to the door. As he stepped inside, the whispering stopped. The beam of light hit the tent, motionless, zipped. The Blue Ridge Parkway stretches like a ribbon of twilight through the Appalachian Highlands, a road famed for its beauty, serenity, and the way fog rolls through it like the breath of the dead. But along one quiet bend, known to locals as the Hollow, there's a story whispered by hikers, campers, and truckers alike, a tale about the shadow that doesn't belong to anyone. It began decades ago, before the parkway was fully paved. Loggers called the area Whistler's Hollow, for the strange sounds that drifted through the trees at night, notes too human to be wind. In 1957, a small fire swept through a temporary campsite where road workers were staying. 3 men died that night. The cause was ruled accidental, an overturned kerosene lantern, but those who survived said they saw something moving through the smoke. Something tall, thin, and blacker than the fire itself. They said it didn't burn. Years later, the site was converted into a scenic overlook, a place where travelers pull over to rest, take photos, or camp a night before continuing. But the forest there has never quite settled. Locals say no matter the season, the hollow always feels colder, quieter, heavier. Even the birds avoid it. In the fall of 2014, a wildlife photographer named Karen Holt stopped there for the night. She was documenting autumn foliage and thought the overlook would make an ideal base, isolated, peaceful, and high above the valley fog. She pitched her tent near the tree line, started a small fire, and began editing her photos. As darkness deepened, she noticed something odd on one of her shots. A faint smudge on the horizon, like a silhouette. She zoomed in. It wasn't on the next photo, nor the one before it. But in that single frame, the shape was clear, a figure standing in the distance, perfectly still, where there shouldn't have been anyone. At first, she dismissed it as lens flare or camera movement. But when she stepped out to stretch, she saw it. Down the hill, between the trees, a shape darker than shadow was standing, tall, narrow, with no defined face or features. Its edges shimmered faintly in the firelight, as though it were made of smoke trying to stay solid. Karen froze. For a long moment it didn't move. Then, slowly, it began to shift, one step, then another, each movement impossibly smooth, soundless. She grabbed her camera and took another picture. The flash illuminated the trees, but the figure was gone. When she checked the photo, it wasn't empty. The figure was closer now, that was enough. She doused her fire, jumped into her car, and drove until sunrise. When she developed the photos the next day, she found something she hadn't noticed before. In each image, no matter the angle or distance, the shadow had one arm outstretched, as if reaching for her. She never camped again. Years passed, but the stories didn't stop. Hikers began reporting strange phenomena along that same stretch. Shadows that moved against the wind, whispers echoing from empty clearings, and patches of ground that felt warm in the middle of winter. One park ranger who patrolled the area in 2018 claimed to have seen a silhouette crossing the road in front of his truck. When he stopped, the figure disappeared, but a smear of ash remained where it had stood. Locals began calling it the burnt man of the hollow. Some said it was the spirit of a worker who perished in the fire, forever walking the ridge in search of the men who left him behind. Others whispered darker theories, that it wasn't human at all, but something older, something that lived in the forest long before the road was cut through. In October 2021, a group of campers decided to test the legend. They recorded their trip on video for a small YouTube channel, laughing about hunting ghosts and staying overnight in the hollow. The footage was found 2 days later in an abandoned tent. The camera showed the group laughing around a fire. Then the laughter stopped. One of them pointed into the darkness, saying he saw someone standing between the trees. Another joked that it must be the burnt man. They shined a flashlight and caught a glimpse of a figure standing perfectly still. The light flickered and the camera shook as someone screamed. The last frame showed the tent from inside, fabric glowing red as if light was coming from outside, and then the sound of crackling. Not flames, electricity. Park authorities never found the campers. The tent was unburned, untouched, but the inside smelled of ozone and smoke. Today, truckers driving the Blue Ridge Parkway at night still report glimpses of movement near that overlook, an outline just beyond the headlights. Some say it follows the curve of the road, matching their speed. Others have seen it reflected in their mirrors long after they've passed the hollow. Those who've stopped to investigate never linger long. The air there feels wrong, too dry, too warm. And every now and then, if you listen past the rustle of the trees, you can hear faint, rhythmic breaths, like something still burning, long after it should have turned to ash. The footage recovered from that night spread quietly among paranormal circles, analyzed frame by enthusiasts who claimed to spot more than just the shadow. Some said you could see faces flickering in the darkness around the campers, pale outlines caught between one frame and the next. Others noticed something even stranger, a faint distortion in the air, as though the temperature itself had warped. Local authorities never released the official report, but a ranger, who spoke anonymously to a regional newspaper, shared that the forest around the campsite had been unnaturally scorched. The trees nearest the tent showed no signs of open flame, yet their bark was blackened in thin, precise streaks, as if they'd been brushed by heat. "We don't get fires like that," the ranger said. "We get lightning strikes, careless campers, but this was something else." The burn marks didn't spread, they just appeared. After the disappearance, the overlook was officially closed. A small wooden barricade was placed across the entrance, and the area was marked as unstable terrain. Yet even as it faded from public maps, the hollow refused to stay forgotten. In October 2022, a truck driver named Samuel Ray was hauling equipment through the parkway during the late night hours. The fog was thick, so dense his high beams seemed to hit a wall. He slowed down near mile marker 238, where the old overlook used to be, when something flickered in the corner of his eye. A shadow crossed the road. He slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop, tires screeching on damp asphalt. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the engine stalled. The dashboard lights flickered, then died. Samuel cursed under his breath, reaching for his flashlight. That's when he saw it. Standing directly in front of his truck, illuminated by the dim glow of a dying headlight, was a figure. Its form was completely black, darker than the surrounding night, but it shimmered faintly, like smoke caught in moonlight. It was tall with limbs too long, its head slightly tilted, as if curious. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The temperature in the cab dropped sharply. Frost bloomed on the inside of the windshield. Then it moved. Not forward, but sideways, gliding, no sound, no footsteps. As it passed through the beam, Samuel saw what lay beneath the shadow's surface, the faintest impression of a face, stretched and warped, like something pressing against glass from the other side. The truck roared back to life by itself. The headlights flared bright, and just like that, it was gone. Samuel drove through the rest of the night without stopping. When he pulled into a diner at dawn, he stumbled out pale and trembling. The cook on duty later said his jacket smelled faintly of burnt wood and static, like a campfire struck by lightning. He never drove that route again. A month later, a team of paranormal investigators entered the hollow illegally to document electromagnetic activity. What they captured was beyond explanation. The footage, later leaked online, showed high EMF spikes followed by a strange sound. Not wind, not wildlife. It was rhythmic, measured, like breathing. Then faintly under that sound came another. A crackle, sharp, dry, electric. One of the investigators whispered, "Do you smell that?" Another voice answered, "Smoke?" The camera panned to the tree line. A black shape was standing there. The video cut out. Authorities found the group's gear a week later. No one was missing, but none of them would speak about what happened. One member interviewed off record said only, "It doesn't walk like a man. It's like it's remembering how to be one." Researchers later uncovered a detail buried deep in state archives. In 1957, during the original construction fire, the coroner's report listed 3 men dead. But 4 names were written on the work roster that night. The fourth, a foreman named Elias Wren, was never found. His bunk had been empty. His boots melted to the floor, and in one surviving witness statement, long forgotten until now, a worker described seeing something staggering out of the blaze. It looked like a man, the statement read, but its skin was black as the smoke. The fire didn't touch him, he just walked into the woods. Since then, every autumn, the hollow burns without flame. The air grows dry, the trees sweat sap that smells like tar, and travelers see the burnt man pacing along the ridgeline, arms slightly raised, as if still reaching through smoke for the men who left him behind. Those who stop, those who stare say he notices them. Their car radios hiss. The lights flicker, and if they don't drive off immediately, they hear it. The faint sound of breathing right outside their door. Sometimes, they even see a single black handprint seared into the metal when the morning sun rises. The Park Service still calls it unstable ground. But locals know the truth. The ground isn't unstable. It's alive. In the northwestern corner of Montana, near the edge of Glacier National Park, lies an expanse of untouched wilderness called Elk Meadow, a stretch of pine and cedar forest so quiet it feels like the earth itself is holding its breath. Hunters call it beautiful. Locals call it cursed. The story begins in the fall of 1996, when a small group of college friends from Missoula decided to spend a weekend camping before winter set in. There were 5 of them, 3 men, 2 women, all experienced hikers. They were last seen buying supplies at a general store in Columbia Falls. One of them joked to the clerk, "If we don't come back, send a search party." The clerk laughed. But the search party did come. When rangers found their campsite days later, the tents were still standing. The campfire had long gone out, the ashes cold and damp from rain. Backpacks were neatly stacked, sleeping bags unzipped. Food still on the picnic table, half-eaten. No sign of struggle, no footprints leading away. It was as though every person there had simply stood up and vanished. The official report called it a probable animal encounter. though no evidence supported that claim. No blood, no torn fabric, no drag marks, just emptiness. Over the years, theories multiplied. Some said it was a bear attack, others a lightning storm, or even human foul play. But locals tell a different story. They say Elk Meadow is a place where the ground itself remembers, a place where the forest takes back what belongs to it. In 2019, a documentary crew from Oregon decided to revisit the case. They were filming a series on unsolved wilderness disappearances, and Elk Meadow fit the bill. The team consisted of 4 people: director Evan Barnes, camerawoman Marisol Cortez, sound tech Leo, and researcher Dana Price. They arrived in mid-October, when the air had that heavy amber stillness unique to fall, and the pine needles blanketed the forest floor like velvet. Their plan was simple: camp 2 nights, retrace the original group's route, and record atmospheric footage for the documentary. The first day went smoothly. The crew filmed interviews with locals, people who swore they'd seen strange lights in those woods, or heard voices at night when no one else was around. By evening, they set up camp in the same clearing where the college students had once stayed. That's when things began to shift. As night fell, a dense fog rolled in, unnatural, heavy, like smoke without fire. The forest fell silent. Not a single cricket, not one rustle of wind. The world seemed to pause. Evan was the first to notice the noise, a faint hum, like a faraway generator. But there was no cabin, no road for miles. The sound grew louder, turning into a low vibration that seemed to come from the ground itself. Marisol tried to record it, but her mic picked up only static. When she replayed the audio, the static wasn't random. It pulsed, steady and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. At 1:13 a.m., Dana woke to whispering, soft, fragmented, surrounding the tent. She thought it was Evan or Leo, but when she unzipped the flap, the others were fast asleep. The voices came from the fog. They weren't speaking English, or anything human. The next morning, the crew decided to leave early. But when they went to pack up, they realized something impossible. Their tire tracks from the day before were gone. No sign of their truck. No road. The meadow looked the same, but the orientation was different. The tree line had shifted. Even the slope of the land felt wrong, like the forest had rearranged itself overnight. Leo began filming, narrating nervously. We're lost. GPS isn't working. Compass is spinning. We're hearing something out there. His voice trembled. I think it's closer now. That was the last entry found on the camera. A search team found their camp 3 days later. Once again, the tents were standing, the fire burned out, food still warm. The same impossible pattern repeated. No tracks, no struggle, no trace of the people who'd been there. But this time, there was something new. In the center of the camp stood a pine tree that hadn't been there before. It was tall, thin, and blackened at the roots, as if recently struck by lightning. Carved into its bark were 5 initials, the same initials as the missing college students from 1996. The documentary footage recovered from the crew's cameras was reviewed by the sheriff's department, but never released publicly. A ranger who viewed it later told a friend, "There's one clip you can't forget. The last 30 seconds before it cuts out. You can hear them all screaming, but it doesn't sound like they're screaming in pain. It sounds like they're being pulled away, like the sound is stretching." In the years since, no one has camped in Elk Meadow overnight. The area remains open to hikers during the day, but locals warn travelers not to linger after dusk. Some say that when the fog returns in late October, you can still see faint lights moving through the trees. Flashlights, they say, from the missing campers, still searching for a way out. And sometimes, when the wind is right, you can hear voices carried from deep within the fog. Not cries for help, but whispers. Calm, familiar, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Always 5. No one knows what the forest took that night, but whatever it was, it's still there, watching, waiting, listening for the next campfire to flicker alive beneath the pines. Because in Elk Meadow, the forest doesn't just grow, it remembers. When the fog returned that evening, the forest looked like something from another time. The trees loomed impossibly tall, their shapes bending in the haze like they were being seen through water. The air smelled of damp moss and iron, the same metallic scent that hangs in the air after lightning strikes. Even though the sky above was clear and starless, Evan was pacing near the fire, trying to get a radio signal. His voice cracked over the static. Nothing. It's like the forest is swallowing the signal. Dana sat nearby, hugging her knees, her eyes wide and unfocused. The trees are closer, she whispered. They weren't that close this morning. Marisol was reviewing the footage they'd shot earlier, scrolling through frame by frame. Guys, she said softly, you need to see this. On the camera screen was a shot from the afternoon before. Leo standing near the fire pit, holding the boom mic. Nothing seemed strange at first, but as Marisol scrubbed the timeline forward, shadows began appearing behind Leo. First one, then two, then a full dozen. Human-shaped but too still. They stood between the trees, motionless, half swallowed by fog, and when she zoomed in, their faces weren't there. Just smooth, bark-like skin where features should have been. Those weren't there when I filmed, she said. I swear they weren't. That's when Leo screamed. He had wandered a few yards from the camp, following something he thought he saw. A faint blue light hovering just above the ground. Now he was stumbling backward, his flashlight shaking wildly, catching glimpses of movement in the dark. Something's out there, he shouted. It's whispering my name. Evan grabbed a flare gun from the gear bag and fired it into the trees. The red light burst through the fog, revealing empty forest, but the sound didn't stop. The whispering continued, growing louder, like dozens of overlapping voices whispering from inside the earth. Then came the thud. A heavy rhythmic impact beneath their feet, like something enormous moving underground. The fire flickered. The soil beneath the logs cracked. Dana backed away, clutching the camera to her chest. Evan, she whispered. Something's under us. A split second later, the ground split open. The collapse wasn't wide, no more than a few feet across, but it revealed a pit of impossible depth. The air that poured from it was cold enough to frost their breath. Evan aimed his flashlight inside, and what he saw made him drop it instantly. It wasn't dirt or rock down there. It was wood, layers and layers of roots, but they weren't natural. They formed twisted shapes resembling arms, torsos, even faces, hundreds of them, tangled together like a web of human forms growing upward from the earth. And deep within that network of roots, faint lights pulsed, glowing blue in perfect rhythm with the whispers. Marisol screamed. They ran, or tried to. But the fog thickened so fast it became like running through water. The trees seemed to move, closing in. Their lights began to flicker out one by one. Leo was the first to vanish, his scream cutting short, replaced by a heavy silence that made their ears ring. Evan and Dana made it only a few hundred feet before they tripped over something buried in the soil. It was a backpack, old, torn. The tag still visible beneath a layer of dust and moss. University of Montana, 1996. Run! Dana shouted, but Evan froze, staring into the trees. In the beam of his flashlight stood 5 figures, human-shaped, motionless. Their skin was pale as birch bark, their eyes hollow black pits. Each wore the remnants of old, decayed clothing, and from their mouths leaked faint trails of mist. They moved in perfect unison. One step forward, pause, another, and another. Evan fired another flare, but it did nothing. The light passed right through them, like they weren't solid, like they were shadows pretending to be people. When the flare light died, so did the last sound from the camp. 3 days later, the rescue team found only the same repeating scene. Tents still standing, food uneaten, equipment arranged neatly, and that blackened pine tree in the center of camp.